Okay, great. Thanks everyone for the patience. My name is Nick. I'm a software developer. I worked with Flutter for 3 years. Before that, I was doing React Native. That's how I came into the mobile development. Before that, I was doing web. And I work at Base1. We are providing services specialized in e-commerce. We are expert in SAP Commerce Cloud, in Flutter, with GCP, so we can provide a whole e-commerce solution to our clients. I'm the representative here, and we have Luis over there with our Base1 swag on. I will talk to you about my client. My client is Cloud9, and yes, it's a fake name. I didn't ask permission for using their brand and name, so here I am. This is taken from this TV show on Netflix my girlfriend's daughter loves, so Cloud9. Cloud9 is a supermarket company, US-based, but they have stores in all over the world. They have a website, a e-commerce website for each country. And since February 2021, we are providing a native app as well, using the same API as the web. It is deployed on Android and iOS. It's using Flutter, obviously. It's a single code base, and we generate multiple apps. One for each country. We have non-prod environment, etc. It's currently used in 10 countries and counting so far, and generates millions of dollars of sales. Not every day, but sometimes we reach like 1 million daily users worldwide, so quite a big app. So the project started in February 2021. 8 or 9 months later, we released phase 1 in Japan and Australia, and then 9 months later, that was phase 2 in Mexico and UK. Mexico and UK are big markets for Cloud9, so it was a stress test phase, let's say. And then Korea and Taiwan last year. Korea and Taiwan were a bit tricky because those markets already had an app that Cloud9 Korea and Cloud9 Taiwan developed on their own. And it's easier to provide a new app than to replace one because users' expectations are higher. And then we integrate the Cloud9 release workflow. They're doing a release every 4 times a year. Infrastructure, website, mobile app, etc. Here we go. We are using Firebase a lot, lots of Firebase products. I've only listed here the ones that have a native SDK. We are using more than that, like Cloud Function, hosting, the thing for app deployment. Maybe it's app deployment, I don't know. But yeah, we use Firebase a lot. And for some of the products, especially analytics or Crashlytics, performance, the usage of those SDK are scattered all over the code base. So Firebase has a deep print in the code base. I mentioned multiple applications. So how we do that? We have a single code base, and we generate. Let's start with the right. One app for each market, and one app for multiple apps for our dev and QA workflow. So those apps are UAT, QA, pre-prod, etc. And they are using Firebase. We have set up one Firebase project for each country as well. That's our way to containerize the market between one from another. We don't want the Japanese administrators sending a push notification by mistake to Australian users. But for non-prod, we keep it simple and use one project. Yeah, Lance?
Did you say one project per market?
Yes.
One Firebase project?
Yeah. But the Firebase projects have 2 apps, the iOS one and the Android one. Except the shared project, which have 8. 8 apps. Okay, and for legacy reason, I think for remote config, one of the Firebase products, we actually added a Firebase project for the non-prod environment as well. So remote config is specific to one environment, but the rest of Firebase, push notification, Firestore, etc., are using shared. We tried. Remote config is one of the Firebase projects that handle a secondary instance of Firebase. So you have Firebase in your app, all your Firebase products are using this instance, but remote config can connect to another Firebase instance. And we use that in, we wanted to try that because we wanted to release, ultimately, a single country application, sorry, a multi-country application, so one app for multiple countries. So by doing that, we are hoping to still have one Firebase per country, but one app, which would have been simpler. But it wasn't possible because of push notification that doesn't handle that feature, and that was a product with a critical separation between countries. Anyway. So how do we do that? We have multiple flavors or configuration. Flavors and configuration is Android and iOS name of the same feature. We use that for customizing the build. It is used, for instance, when you want to release an app with a paid version and a restricted free version, or an app with in-app purchases on iOS and paid version on Android or whatever. We can also white labeling app with that, so you can customize the splash screen, the logo, the name, the theme, etc. I put this little meme here because one of the direction I wanted to give to this talk, one of the motto, one of the takeaway for you when you live in this room is do not fear the native. I think that's one of the difference between junior Flutter developer and a more experimented one. We are all Flutter developer. We are using a cross-platform framework, which is an abstraction on top of the native world, Android and iOS. It's fine. It works well, but in the industry, you always have to dive into the native world. So let's start it with this flavor configuration thing. How is it done? So let me open. Let's start with Android because it's simpler. You can do that in code. So you can open the app build.gradle. Oh yeah, let's start from the beginning. Is that okay? Oh yeah. There is a handy settings I just discovered now, which is a zoom here. Before that, I was playing with the font size, but now we have the zoom settings in Android. I think it's new, but not sure. Anyway, better?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so this is in iOS, in a classic Flutter project, you have an Android folder and an iOS folder. Those contain an Android application and an iOS application. Those are the empty shell that receive the Flutter application. So let me open Android. I can open this folder uniquely with Android Studio. I won't because I'm already in Android Studio, but this is a real Android native project. So I open the app build.gradle, which is the main file project descriptor in Android. And if I scroll, yeah, here. I can define my product flavor here. So I have, for instance, QA, pre-prod, and I have the country-specific version, Australia, New Zealand, etc. And I customize the app ID, so that's how I have a different app application in the App Store and Play Store. I can customize the app name and different things. And on iOS, you have to do that in the iOS way, meaning that in Xcode. in the software itself. Here we go. So those are not my configuration, but those are my scheme. And from the scheme are created the configuration. And then you can customize settings based on the configuration. For instance, if I scroll far, 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 I have somewhere here, maybe the app name. So for the country, it's Cloud9 most of the time. But for QA, it's like Cloud9 QA, stuff like that. Is it okay for everyone? Question? Right. A little difference we have with our non-prod environment, QA, pre-prod, etc., is a country selector on startup. When the app starts, we open that page first. Then we click on one of the buttons. The app restarts, and because the country is set, we start on the country homepage. And if you go in the settings screen, clear the settings, the app restarts, and you are back on that setting to eventually change a country. And this is very convenient for us, developer, and for QA, because if you have a country, a bug that is specific to one country, you can go to that country directly without caring about which build you have to configure, etc. It's also faster because we build only one app in our day-to-day workflow.
Just a quick question.
Yeah?
It means that you, at the end of your CI, you just pushing one artifact?
This
all
is for our
the flavors and the configuration you were talking about, or?
So this is for our day-to-day workflow. So yes, our nightly build and our pull request build is building only one app. But when we want to release a new version, we push the button and then we build a 13 app. Okay. Sometimes I say 10, sometimes I say 13 because I don't track which country are in production. Luis knows that better than me. Okay, so that story went well for 3 years, and this fall, Cloud9 came for us and asking us for a new country rollout. We did that multiple times, it was fine, except this country was China. And China come with a lot of constraints. China is very picky on where the user data are stored. So all the data used by the app in a large meaning, like analytics, crash report as well, user data, obviously payment information, etc. Everything must be stored on Chinese server. Either self-hosted, it's fine, or using Chinese company like Tencent or I don't remember the name. So Firebase doesn't work, basically. No GCP, no AWS, no Firebase, nothing. So we have to strip out Firebase from the app on a 3-year-old project that use Firebase like deeply, like I said. So different dependencies, and we have to find alternative for each Firebase product. Remote config, cloud messaging, etc. So we are currently in the process of doing that, and there are solutions, like there are Tencent Analytics, there are alternative for cloud messaging. Instead of using Crashlytics, we will likely use Sentry, because Sentry can be self-hosted, and so on. Because we are like good developers and we like to do things clean, we set up ourselves nice to have goals. It's good to have alternative for Firebase, but ultimately we want to have Firebase out of the app completely. We don't want to have the Firebase SDK silent in the final build, IPA or AAB. which is a kind of obvious, but because we are using a single code base, it's not that easy. And it works in the other side too, because we will have to integrate Chinese SDK, and we don't want to have those SDK in the country that doesn't use it. And second nice to have goal is to preserve our QA and dev experience. We have, I think, hundreds of administrators, testers, people that are using the app on that are not users, I mean. And those people, we don't want to disturb their way of working. There are people sends dozens of push notification or create dynamic link in Firebase console and everything. We don't want to change the workflow of that. So it means that China is still available in the country selector, and for us developer, we still want to clone the project, run Flutter Pup-get, and run without any other configuration. So, ambitious goals. But thankfully, we have multiple weapons in our arsenal. First one is the architecture of the project itself. We use a layered architecture. It's not clean architecture or something like that. It's just a layered architecture with a clean distinction between UI, business logic, and what I call data. So in case of Flutter, UI is pretty obvious. It's our widget, page, app, etc. The business logic is implemented with block. We use block and just that. You can see here page block and global rows. It's just that we try to scope the block in two different places, either the app itself or by page, like search result, for instance. And then the service are just class singleton with method, fetch user, update cart, etc. And they rely on third-party singletons. And those third-party singletons are actually not only, but they are also the Firebase SDK we want to get rid of. This
question.
Yeah.
How do you manage the dependency injection for block?
That's the next slide.
Okay.
Oh, for block specifically?
Or just
yeah,
for block
okay.
and in general, yeah.
Okay, next slide. This diagram is 3 years old. I made that 3 years old when we started the project, and I can say today that it's pretty much relevant. So yeah, I'm quite proud of this. I recently wrote a Reddit comment because it's a Flutter dev named Eric Windmill who were asking about feedback about architecture. So I went with the full blog post. Well, so I put the link here if you want to know more about that. Dependency injection then. We use gedit a lot. All our PCs are registered in gedit. It's just a singleton registry. It's very simple. You can actually implement it yourself if you want. All the architecture PCs, but the block, we don't put the block in it because the block are instantiated by Flutter block provider, sorry, because it handles the dispose when the widget is unmounted. So if we put those blocks in gedit, we would have to do that manually. So that's the reason we didn't. For example, digital service, Cloud9 is requesting a physical membership card to enter the store. So digital membership is having the card in the app. We register the singleton in gedit at app start, and then, so this is not the main file, this is a bit confusing, but then once it's registered, we can use it all over the code base by just doing getit.instant.get and providing in the generic type the class, and it will automatically return the singleton, the instance of that class in the registry. We added getit for testability because if a class is using digital membership service, we can, in the test only, provide a mock instead of the real implementation and having a unit test. We were using it wrong. Well, not wrong, but in a simplified way. Because the classic way is to actually do this. We can provide a generic type when registering, and then provide the implementation. And the difference is that we can then retrieve the singleton by its interface. And introduce loose coupling between the class, the singleton, and the class that are using it. I can show you that. If I go to Studio, oops, deep link helper. So this is the interface. Oh yeah, basically. I forgot. There is no interface keyword in Dart. So when I say interface, it's like the concept of interface. So it's an abstract class in reality. But conceptually, it's an interface. Anyway, in my interface, quote unquote, I have a method with no body in it. And with in the implementation, I can actually found somewhere, blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's private. Here we go, the implementation of the method. And we did that in only one place, actually. We did that for the null safety migration we did 1 year ago, because deep link helper is the class in charge of redirecting to the right screen when a deep link is incoming. So in the import, it imports all the page of the application, and all the page of the application are importing all the widgets too. So basically, all the UI layer were imported by that file. And when we were doing null safety migration, we want to do it incrementally. So it was too much of a knot that we wanted to break down. That's how we introduced loose coupling between the import. Okay, and finally, last weapon in our arsenal is tree shaking of the import. When you compile a Dart or a Flutter app, the compiler starts with the main file, reads the import of the import, the import of the import of the import, etc. And that's all the code that is compiled at the end. It works a bit like a JavaScript bundler on the web, like Webpack. Is Webpack still a thing in JavaScript? Yeah, good. Meaning that if you create a class in your Dart project and you don't import it anywhere, it's dead code basically, it's fine for the compiler, not for the project maintenance, but the compiler doesn't see it. So I think about all that, I thought about all that, and I start to see like the beginning of a plan. What if we centralize all the Firebase usage in one place, and then we provide an abstraction layer with interface and implementation, like I showed earlier, to abstract those usage. The first part was already done. Like I said, we had a clean, well-maintained architecture, so it was like 80 to 90% done, maybe. I actually organized the code with the interface thing and implementation thing. And once we have that, that's the preparation step, I would say. We can have the second step, which is having a dedicated main file for China that will register the singleton with the non-Firebase implementations. So this way, Firebase will be never imported in the compilation process. So that's what I did. Before doing that, that was the implementation at that time. We have the main Dart, simplified version. It does more than 3 lines, but it's still short. We put all the registration calls in a class name initialization helper, in a method init, and then we are able to run the app. in the initialization helper, we are, like I said, registering the singleton this way. And then all the singletons were ready to be used in the app. So for instance, in the address search block, I can get the singleton, get the instance of Crashlytics, to manually record an error. And the problem is, for doing that, I need to import Crashlytics. I need to have the same line as here, inside my block. So that's how we ended up with multiple import everywhere of Firebase. So that is the import we want to break, we want to remove. Yeah, this one. So yeah, the abstraction, the interface and the implementation will introduce loose couple between imports, so I will be able to do that. So instead of, so yeah, I still register Crashlytics, but I also register what I call the crash report service. That's my interface. And the implementation provided will be an implementation baked by Crashlytics. Crashlytics crash report service. I can show you that. Here, monitoring interface. So this is the service, and it just like basically a pass-through to Crashlytics record error. And that's it. The rest of the code base. Oh no, sorry. Yeah, it changed because yeah, sorry. So now I have this interface. I can retrieve the singleton with crash report service, and Crashlytics is no longer imported. And the beauty of the thing is I imported crash report service, but this class doesn't import anything because it's just an interface. That simple. So I did that for all Firebase product, one by one. You can check for the date. I took like 2 weeks to do that. Some of the SDK were easier than other. For instance, yeah, some SDK came also with entities like cloud messaging. You have the message entity. So I had to duplicate that entity and make one generic, because otherwise I would keep importing cloud messaging. But overall, it went pretty well. Now I can jump to step 2, which is the main file specific for China. Still Freeline, but instead of using initialization helper, I'm using China initialization helper. And this file is registering an implementation based on Sentry instead of Crashlytics. I can show you this one, but it's not written. Work in progress. So it works. I can do a little demo. I have the app running here. I'm connected, yes, okay. So this is the environment selector, API selector, and then the country selector I mentioned. So let's start with Australia, which is a country using Firebase. Continue as guest. And I have added a little entry for demo purposes here. When I click on that button, Firebase token, it printed the Firebase token in the console. The Firebase token is a user ID. It is used to target one user. If you want to send a push notification to only one user, you can. Here we go. So that's my Firebase token printing. So that's the cloud messaging SDK in action. Now I go to the settings screen, clear application data, yes. And now I select China. I don't read Chinese, but I know where the buttons are. And here we go. So now instead of printing the Firebase token, I'm printing to do, because guess what? The alternative for cloud messaging is not implemented yet. But it's actually... Oh, it's not messaging, it's notification, sorry. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, yeah. Here we go. My to-do. Okay. Any questions so far? So the result is less compiled code. I have some metric to prove that. So thanks to tree shaking, the compilation take less time, and I have a bit less than 2 megabytes of my final bundle size. It's not much. It's not much. But the only thing I removed at this point is some Dart code that is not compiled anymore. So the difference in size is just the binary result of that Dart code. So it's obviously not much at all. I was expecting that, and I was actually happy with that because it proved me that tree shaking works. Because tree shaking of the import is a very obscure feature in Flutter. Flutter or Dart teams, the Flutter team, are telling us that there are tree shaking of the import, but we actually don't really have a hand on it. It's in the compiler way of working, you know. And I actually found a question from Rémi Rousselet, who is the creator of Provider, saying that how do we know, you know? So short answer is we can know, but it's quite tricky and a hacky way to see it. There is a Flutter issue, well, a Dart issue about that. Customers want guidance on docs for tree shaking, saying that there are none. It's a bit of a guess, and it's quite easy to break. Let's say. So let's create a widget. Just here, new, dot file. Don't name your file like that. Yes, stateless, demo. There you go. When you import something, at least in Android Studio, let's say you use material for all your imports. If you just miss one and you click inadvertently on Cupertino, you ended up bringing all the Cupertino widgets in your app, and they are compiled, and they weren't compiled before. So yeah, there is a improvement in that field, in my opinion. So back to my case, I was really happy with it. So I can I can improve my solution. Remember my nice to have goal. One was preserving the QA and dev experience. The second one was removing the SDKs completely. So that's why I'm talking now. So previously, the way it was working, so previously means pre-China, we have an entry point, the main, and then we call the initialization helper, we instantiate we register some singletons, the ones that are the same for all countries. We show the country selector. Once the country is set, we can register the rest of the singletons. And finally, we are able to see the home page. And if we have China in the country selector, if you build your app with the China main file, you open China, it works perfectly. But if you bring the country selector again and select UK, UK will use Firebase. But the app hasn't been built with Firebase, so it will crash. So what we did is a third main file and a third initialization helper for our non-prod environment. And that third initialization helper actually instantiates the two other, and both methods are are called on both. So we instantiate pretty much everything. So the resulting build is a bit bloated. It's bigger than expected, but it's fine-ish because it's for us. It's not shipped. It's not deployed. And I was planning to do a demo of that, but I actually already did it because I switched from Australia to China. Second goal was to strip the dependencies. So stripping the Flutter plugins. So package versus plugins. All are listed in the postspec.yaml, but the plugins are the dependencies that have a native counterpart. They are listed differently in Android Studio. Here, because in the external library, I have the Dart packages. That's my dependency who only contain Dart code. And below I have my Flutter plugins. So those, let's open Firebase Cloud Messaging, for instance. Those have, okay, bad example. Yeah, this one. Those have a lib directory with Dart code, the Dart binding in it. And they also have an iOS folder and an Android folder containing native files. And those files are linked at build time. At build time. The main source of truth is still the postspec.yaml. So package or plugins are all listed in the postspec.yaml. So that's where we will do things to customize our build. So what we want is our non-prod environment containing all dependencies. So that's actually the reference. That's the version that is in version control. And then we will strip out libraries from that file. So for China, if we build for China, we remove the Firebase plugins. And if we build for another country, we don't do much now, but in the future we will strip the Chinese Firebase alternative. So how does it work? Again, do not fear the native. Let's see. It's all contained in Flutter. Flutter is an abstraction over Android and iOS, and it does everything for us to not dig into that world. But like I said, sometimes we have to. So Flutter integrates with the dependency management of iOS, Cocoa pods. So I open my iOS folder, I open my pod file, and this is the dependency descriptor for the iOS app. I do not have syntax color. Oh, come on, Android Studio. Let's try this. Vim, iOS. Oh, how many times? Oh, that's my remaining time here. I never seen that from the beginning.
6.
Oh shit, okay. Yeah, it's done actually in those two functions. Flutter iOS pod file setup and Flutter install all iOS pods. So those are methods. This is a Ruby code, by the way. Those are methods declared in the Flutter SDK itself, and it will read all the dependencies, see the ones that are plugins, and link the iOS folder the iOS folder content I showed you earlier. And back in the Xcode, so runner is my project, the one that is being created with Flutter Create, and pod is the generated one, generated from scratch, from nothing, by Cocoa Pods. So I can see my dependencies somewhere in it. And in my main project, I have a build phase here where I copy pod resources. So that's how my iOS native files in my Flutter plugin come in the native build. I can't zoom that. It's Xcode. It's impossible. Sorry for that. Here we go. And on Android, it's still in the app build.gradle, and it's a bit earlier here. Apply from, and in the Flutter SDK itself, we have a Gradle file that does the thing. To strip the Firebase dependency, I'm using, so it happened on the CI build, because like I said, in non-prod, in my local environment, I don't need to. I'm using all the dependencies and the country selector and being able to switch from country to another. But in CI, when I build for China or for another country, I edit the pubspec.yaml on the fly, using that Unix library to edit. It edits XML, JSON, and in my case, YAML file. So I'm removing the dependency like by hand. I'm not proud of this, okay? I'm not proud of this because it's easier to miss one, or like it's hard to have a vision of what countries ship what libraries, etc. But that's the only way I found. What I envisioned at the beginning was something directly in the pod file, in the pubspec, where we can have maybe meaningful comments with a whitelist of flavor or blacklist of flavor. And having a more powerful tool would allow us to generalize the process. For instance, Apple Pay is used only for Japan, Korea, and UK. So currently, even though there is no China, no constraint, whatever, Mexico build is shipping Apple Pay for nothing. So we can generalize the process and customize our build more. My younger me, without kids, with plenty of time, would have done that. But I went with this one. Yeah.
Can you use different text file for build?
Not really, not really. The pubspec is a project descriptor. So having multiple one means multiple projects.
But you can also, for example, maybe for the pubspec.cm.yaml, and in the CI, you switch copy and rename it.
Yeah, why not? But there is a lot of duplicated stuff, because only this part is changing, whereas all the rest is declared 3 times, and you have to maintain it. Imagine you upgrade a library, change a version, you have to change it in the free, different pubspec.yaml. Actually, the solution doesn't exist, but it's at least identified. It should come from Flutter itself. And what I want is to have simply different dependencies per flavor. And there is an issue open for that. Exactly what I want. Like, it's open, so it's 4 years now, still open. It won't come anytime soon, I'm afraid. But if you want to add a thumb up on that, I greatly appreciate that. Ooh, it's red now. In the same way, Flutter abstracts a lot of things when adding a dependency, but sometimes you have to manually update the native file. if you go to the Firebase Getting Start guide, you have to add some lines in the app-delegate.swift, something like that. So it's the same when you want to remove it, you have to deal with manual change as well. I won't show you that because I don't have time, but I actually managed to do that for both iOS and Android. And finally, the same metric as before. Now the SDKs are removed. So those are CI screenshots. And I can see my gain in weight is a bit bigger on the IPA, on iOS. I reached maybe 10%. A bit less on Android. But actually this APK is just, it's not the one that is shipped. The one that is shipped to Play Console is the AAB. So the gain is a bit better on the AAB. Anyway, I didn't do this for gaining APK size. I just did it for preventing my APK or IPA to grow in size a lot. So it just proved me that it's working. I won't do that either, but I plan to download those APK and IPA and show you that it's just an archive. So in the Finder, you can rename APA and changing to zip. Same thing for APK, and you can see what it's inside. So I check that to see my SDK where and there. Some takeaways. So architecture is the key. It's essential to build a correct architecture and stick with it, maintaining it. None of that would have been possible if we have spaghetti code or technical dev or everything. Unknown path to scalability, because 3 years ago, if someone would have told me that, hey, what if Firebase, what if we can't use Firebase anymore? I thought, never happened. Here you are. Object-oriented programming still works. Good old object-oriented programming, I solved the problem with that. I'm a pragmatic guy, not so fancy, not so keen on functional programming and everything, but I do things. And of course, do not fear the native. Embrace it instead. Thank you for listening. Have we time for a couple of questions?
We can take a question.
Yeah.
Hi. Is it working?
Yeah.
I guess you thought about it, but why haven't you just left Firebase behind and just use our new environment and just use Entry?
Good question. I think Firebase has such a weight in the mobile ecosystem that I think none of it, no mobile developer think about that. It's just the way to go. Because they manage to gather so many different tools that are so practical, cheap. It's not cheap, it's fucking free. So, almost, yeah, depending on the product. But Cloud9 was astonished when we implement the push notification. We were able to do that quickly because it's easy with Firebase and it's free. No, it doesn't matter how much push notification you send, it costs nothing. They didn't believe us at first. Yeah.
And have you found every replacement for Firebase?
It's still in, not really. I think some of them, remote config, for instance, will have to go by hands and coding as kind of an admin console or using a CMS, headless CMS to provide something. But we haven't found it for remote config, for instance.
Thank you.
Behind you.
It's not related to Flutter, but you are decoupling your application finally, and you're implementing the BFF way finally, isn't it? Yeah.
The BFF way? What
The
do you mean?
backend for front end. It's a new kind of architecture with dedicated one backend dedicated for one typology of front end. So basically, you make an abstraction between your front and your back. And this is the microservice architecture way, finally.
I haven't
And it's
seen
not
that way,
related
but-
to Flutter, but I see that in my company with a big retailer. And this is the way they are doing.
Mhm. Yeah. I haven't heard about that architecture before. People in the audience seems to like disagree, or I don't know.
No,
Okay. Yeah, I guess my way to answer it is I followed my guts, and thankfully came to something that works. And yeah, I don't pretend to invent anything, but I'm glad to see that actually I implemented something similar to like best practices or cool.
I have a question about how you are going to monitoring after that the application in China, because China, the data has to stay in China, and if you are in Canada.
So we will use Sentry. Oh well, are we using Sentry, Luis? Is it like established, or is it still in discussion? Okay, I pushed for Sentry because it can be self-hosted. It's a product. You know, Billy knows Sentry, right? Yeah, so it's well known. It's like a valid alternative, and it can be self-hosted. So we'll self-host that on a cloud service in China. That's what will likely happen.
In that case, why do you don't use Supabase, for example?
So Supabase.
It's an equivalent of Firebase, but made with open source data, and it's open source, and you can self-hosting also this one.
You can't have an equivalent of Firebase. You can have an equivalent of a Firebase product. So I think Supabase is more closer to real-time database.
You have the database, the cloud functions, you have notification, I think.
I don't think
No
so.
notification, so for the database. You have, you don't have crash detect, you don't have. You have the file store storage. You have, you have some kind of equivalent of.
Yeah. So we looked at Supabase, and actually, yeah. Do I have? So I name file based on Supabase. No, I renamed it after all. But yeah, we thought about that too, but not for crash reports. I don't think there's a crash report. Yeah. But for all the database stuff, yeah, real-time database and Firestore, it's one of the solutions we forecast. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I have also this issue with the cloud in China, and we have to have a specific company in China that will handle for us all the monitoring and stuff like this. We have to pass a contract with specific company in China to handle all this stuff.
Nice. If you have more question, I can answer that after the talk. Thank you.